My name is Oliver Grant, and admitting that is in itself a battle. For a long time I lived hidden behind an identity I built to survive in a world where pain was currency and violence a common language. I grew up believing I needed to be tough, cold, untouchable. But now, remembering who I really was, I realize I spent a good part of my life trying to escape myself. Today, I have no reason to hide anything anymore. I need to tell the truth, however bitter it may be. I was a drug dealer, not a supporting actor, not someone passing through. I plunged deep into that abyss, believing that it was strength when in fact it was the worst form of weakness. I was selling something that destroyed lives. I saw mothers crying for their children and pretended not to see. I watched young people being swallowed by addiction and pretended it wasn't my problem. Every day that passed, my heart grew harder. I felt no remorse. I felt no pity. What scares me most today is admitting that I reached a point where I felt absolutely nothing. The dirty money in my hands gave me the illusion of victory, as if I were achieving something, when in reality I was losing everything that remained of my soul. I remember the day they called me promising. That should have been a warning, but it did the exact opposite. It fueled my pride. I thought I was climbing the ladder when, in reality, I was descending to the darkest places possible. Every step I took in that life marked me irreversibly. Every choice I made silenced the voice of my conscience a little more, until it disappeared completely. Today I understand. I was alive on the outside, but dead on the inside. And when death finally came for real, it didn't come alone. It brought with it a revelation I could never have imagined facing. If these words have already moved you and awakened something within you, I ask that you subscribe to the channel and leave your like. This is not just support, it's what allows real stories like this to continue reaching those who need to hear them. Stay with me until the end, because what comes next may touch your life in a way you don't expect. When I think about how it all began, I realize that a life of crime didn't present itself to me as an immediate decision, but as a slow, constant, and carefully constructed seduction. The feeling of belonging, however distorted, was the first invitation I received to remain in that environment where every gesture seemed measured by fear and forced respect. I believed I had finally found a place where my name, Oliver Grant, meant something. I clung to this false importance like someone holding onto a broken plank in the middle of a raging ocean, imagining that it could keep me afloat when, in reality, it only dragged me further down. Money flowed in abundance, and with it came the dangerous illusion of power. The luxurious cars, the expensive clothes, the lively nights, all of this constructed around me a scenario that I interpreted as success, even knowing deep down that this artificial glitter hid a darkness far deeper than I was able to comprehend at that moment. I walked the streets as if I owned them, believing that nothing could touch my flesh, my mind, or my soul. However, each step I took reinforced invisible chains that bound me to a life that didn't truly belong to me. The adrenaline of those intense days left me numb, as if the violence and risk were addictive fuels feeding my own blindness. The territorial disputes, the ever-present weapons, the suspicious glances, all of this created a scenario that kept me alert, but irremediably lost. I became so accustomed to the chaos that over time, I began to believe it was a natural part of my existence. My identity was shaped by an environment that corroded my spirituality, my sensitivity, and any possibility of redemption at that moment. With a hardened heart, I pressed on as if I were in complete control, unaware that the same life that offered me a sense of grandeur was silently preparing the exact moment when everything would collapse around me, in a way I would never have dared to imagine. I can remember with almost painful precision the moment when everything began to change inside me, not because of a major event, but because of a seemingly simple gesture that ended up becoming the breaking point between who I could still have been and who I finally became. The first time I gave that substance to someone, a boy much younger than me, I felt a kind of silent shock run through my chest, as if a part of my conscience had been desperately trying to warn me that I was crossing an invisible and terribly dangerous line. However, instead of recoiling, I allowed the feeling to dissipate, as if ignoring that discomfort could erase the gravity of what I had done. The money I received in return came with a strange, almost metallic feeling, a mixture of illusory victory and discomfort that I didn't want to admit. I convinced myself that this was just the beginning of a better life, trying to cover up the growing truth that, at that very moment, I had opened within myself a spiritual door that should never have been unlocked. It was there, in that seemingly small gesture, that my soul began to move away from the light, allowing a subtle but persistent darkness to settle in the deepest places of my being. As the days passed, I realized that the feeling of guilt diminished, not because I was becoming stronger, but because I was becoming more blind. The first delivery left me uneasy, the second already numb, and the third simply became routine. Each time I accepted this new behavior as normal, an additional layer of darkness spread within me, erasing the capacity to feel compassion, love, or empathy. I could no longer distinguish right from wrong, because wrong had become such a silent and gradual part of my daily life that, when I realized it, it was impossible to know where the descent had begun. It was during that same period that I began to believe there was no turning back, without understanding that this was only the beginning of a much deeper spiral, one that would continue pulling me down until the day I finally met death. As the months passed, I realized that the door that had opened within me not only remained wide open, but also seemed to widen even further, allowing a growing indifference to occupy all the spaces that once belonged to my humanity. What initially caused a slight discomfort transformed into a complete absence of sensitivity, as if my heart had been gradually enveloped by a thick layer of stone that prevented any true feeling from reaching my interior. I walked the streets observing people destroying themselves with the same merchandise I supplied, and instead of feeling guilt or concern, I only assessed whether there was enough demand to increase my earnings. I remember mothers pleading for their children, fathers staring at me with a mixture of hatred and despair, believing I could give them back what they had lost, and I simply looked away, as if those expressions didn't carry real suffering. I became someone who ignored the human cry, because inside me, the voice of conscience no longer had enough strength to pierce the void I had created. I knew I was dealing with lives, with destinies, with futures that would never be recovered, but at the same time, I had become so insensitive that all of that turned into numbers, transactions, and opportunities for profit. With each sale, with each choice that reinforced this coldness, I felt less than the day before, to the point of believing that indifference was a form of protection. What I didn't realize was that this supposed protection was slowly destroying what remained of my soul, corroding any possibility of ever feeling empathy, regret, or fear again. It became common to see the pain of others as a natural part of the environment, and this normalization of evil was what completed my inner downfall. I continued with the impression that nothing could reach me, without imagining that this same indifference that kept me cold would also be responsible for leading me to the most unexpected and devastating moment of my existence, a moment that would bring everything down in a matter of seconds. I could never have imagined that death would arrive so abruptly, so silently, and yet so devastatingly. For a long time, I lived surrounded by weapons, conflicts, and hidden enemies. But somehow, I nurtured the dangerous illusion that I was protected by a kind of invulnerability built on the arrogance that accompanied me. I believed I knew every alley in the neighborhood, every face that circulated around me, every suspicious movement that could put my life at risk. However, I discovered too late that no one truly controls their own fate when walking in territory dominated by the darkness they themselves helped create. That day, everything seemed ordinary, but there was a strangeness in the air that I didn't want to acknowledge. The sky was heavy, as if carrying a silent warning that sought to reach my hardened heart, although I was completely blind to any spiritual sign. As I walked down the narrow street, I felt an unusual tension settle in my muscles, a confused intuition trying to warn me that something was about to happen. However, before I could make sense of that unease, I heard a dry, loud, and deep sound that seemed to pierce not only the air, but my flesh and my spirit at the same time, A gunshot rang out like an inevitable sentence. For a brief moment, I tried to understand if that shot had been aimed at me or if it was part of some distant confrontation, but the answer came brutally when I felt an intense heat spread through my chest, accompanied by a deep pain that seemed to tear apart everything that sustained my existence. My knees buckled, and the world before my eyes began to distort, as if reality was slowly unraveling around me. I heard distant voices, running footsteps, someone shouting my name, but everything sounded muffled, as if I was submerged in a dark and heavy sea. As my body fell, I felt life slipping through my fingers, while darkness approached with such absolute force that I had no way to stop it. However, even when everything seemed to be coming to an end, something inside me remained conscious, as if my soul was being called to witness something much greater than the physical death that had overtaken me. As the sounds around me began to fade, I realized that the darkness enveloping me was not merely the end of consciousness, but a transition to something I never imagined experiencing. The initial sensation was of falling, as if my body was sinking into a silent abyss, while something within me remained strangely awake. It was as if my mind refused to shut down, even when everything on the physical plane had already succumbed to the impact of death. A mixture of confusion, fear, and disbelief overwhelmed me, for I could still perceive every detail around me even without feeling my own body respond. It was then that abruptly I felt a kind of gentle yet firm tug, as if an invisible force was separating me from something heavy and worn. Suddenly I was standing, observing the street, the frightened faces, the desperate rush of people trying to understand what had happened. But when my eyes turned to the ground, I saw something that made my spirit tremble deeply. My body stretched out, motionless, with blood spreading around it. The scene struck me with such terrifying clarity that I couldn't immediately accept the idea that that body was mine. I tried to approach, I tried to touch my own arm, but my hand passed through that flesh, as if I were made of wind and memory. An immense dread gripped me, not only because I was seeing my life shattered in two, but because I clearly realized I wasn't dreaming. Everything was too real, too vivid, charged with a spiritual presence I had never felt before. The voices in the distance seemed to echo at a different frequency, as if coming from two dimensions at once, while a strange vibration coursed through the air, announcing that something much bigger was about to happen. I tried to return to my body, tried to lie down on it, desperately trying to reconnect with what I had lost, but the invisible force that kept me away made it clear that that return was no longer within my reach. And it was precisely in that moment of utter despair that the atmosphere around me began to change, setting the stage for an encounter that would mark my soul forever. As I stood there, torn between disbelief and utter terror, I realized that the atmosphere around me was beginning to transform in such a profound way that it couldn't be mistaken for any natural phenomenon. The light around me seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting as if it were alive, and at the same time, a dense, almost palpable silence filled the space where I was, completely replacing the chaos left behind at the scene of my death. It was as if time had been suspended, as if the entire universe stood motionless, awaiting the next event that would define the destiny of my existence. I felt a gentle, yet immense weight rest upon my spirit, a presence so intense that it silenced every thought within me. Gradually, a luminosity began to emerge before me, not like an aggressive glare that hurts the eyes, but like a pure, profound, and infinitely conscious light. This light did not blind me. On the contrary, it penetrated me, traversed the most hidden layers of my being, and revealed what I had spent years hiding even from myself. And then, in that light, a figure took shape. I knew, even before I could see completely, who was before me. It was Jesus, not the Jesus depicted in paintings, films, or sculptures, but a presence so true, so absolute, so indescribably holy, that my whole soul trembled. When he looked at me, there was no word, accusation, or gesture of condemnation. There was only a look that contained all the truth about who I was, a look that exposed my soul without need for explanations, justifications, or defenses. I felt all at once the weight of every choice I had made, every life I had hurt, every opportunity I had squandered, every tear I had caused, and this awareness did not come through shouts or pointing fingers, but through a silent revelation that burned within me with the force of 1,000 storms. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. It was as if his presence drew my gaze and at the same time stripped bare everything I had tried to hide for so many years. The most devastating feeling was realizing that he didn't need to say anything for me to understand the depth of my condemnation. I condemned myself before him, not because he pointed out my error, but because his holiness revealed who I had truly become. And at that very moment I realized that he was about to show me something I would never have the courage to face willingly. When Jesus' gaze penetrated the most hidden regions of my soul, I felt something begin to move around me, as if reality itself were opening up to reveal a dimension that had always existed, but which I had never been able to see. The light emanating from him began to expand, not to envelop me with comfort, but to illuminate everything I needed to face, and which throughout my life I had refused to admit. It was then that the scene around us changed, not as a vision produced by the mind, but as a spiritual truth so profound that it was permanently engraved on my being. Suddenly, I found myself facing familiar and unfamiliar faces, people I had hurt directly or indirectly, people whose lives had been destroyed by the choices I had made with such indifference. I saw children who grew up without parents because those parents fell into the addiction I fueled. I saw mothers kneeling in dark rooms, crying out for children who would never return home. I saw talented young people who lost their future because addiction consumed them from the inside out. Each face carried a fragment of the consequence of my actions, and I felt each one as if it were a thorn piercing my soul. Jesus didn't need to explain anything to me, because the revelation itself said it all. I stood before an eternity built by the very seeds I had planted, and I realized with a clarity I had never had in my life that the destiny of those who destroy lives with drugs is not imposed by God as an arbitrary punishment, but is the inevitable harvest of everything that has been sown with one's own hands. The spiritual landscape around me shifted again, revealing a place of torment so profound that no human word could accurately describe it. I felt an overwhelming emptiness, an absolute absence of God, as if I was staring into an abyss that reflected back only my own amplified wickedness. It was as if eternity was showing me the fate that awaited those who choose to live in darkness and lead others down the same path. And as this truth washed over me, I felt Jesus watching me, not with disdain, but with such deep sorrow that it made me realize that even there, mercy was still available. As I stood before that devastating revelation, I felt something unexpected stir within my spirit, something that seemed to completely contradict the overwhelming weight of guilt that had enveloped me until then. Although I was immersed in images that revealed the extent of my own evil, I realized that Jesus' presence had not departed at any moment, and even though I felt I was facing my ultimate condemnation, there was a kind of silence around him that did not convey rejection, but a kind of hope that I did not fully understand. It was then that, without audible words, but with a spiritual clarity impossible to ignore, I understood that he was offering me something I never expected to receive in that state, a real opportunity for change. The realization that even after everything I had done, the possibility of redemption still existed, made my inner self tremble deeply. I felt as if a gentle, yet extraordinarily powerful force was piercing the dark desert I had built within myself over the years. Gradually, the vision of the consequences of my past began to dissipate, and the light emanating from Jesus returned to fill the space around me, no longer as a painful revelation, but as an invitation to a new beginning. I understood, at that moment, that he was not there merely to show me who I had been, but to allow me to choose who I could be from then on. When my eyes opened in the hospital, surrounded by machines and a cold silence, I felt a mixture of confusion and gratitude coursing through my frail body. Breathing seemed difficult, but at the same time I knew that each breath carried a purpose that surpassed any human understanding. I had returned not because I deserved it, but because God still had something to do through me. From that day on, I made decisions that radically transformed my life. I sought out the families I had hurt. I asked for forgiveness, even when I knew I might never be forgiven. I abandoned all ties to crime, and I stood before God, ready to start over without reservations. This journey was not easy, because true redemption requires renunciation, courage, and a willingness to confront the shadow of one's own past. However, it was on this painful journey that I found the freedom I never had while believing I was in control of my life. And upon realizing this profound truth, I understood that there was something essential I needed to say to all those who still walk on the border between light and darkness. When I finally came to fully understand what had happened to me, I realized that my experience had not been merely an encounter with death, but a direct summons to take responsibility for everything I had left behind for so many years. I understood that returning to life meant not only receiving a new opportunity, but carrying the commitment to warn those who still walk blindly towards the same abyss that almost swallowed me forever. My existence took on a different weight, and in sharing all this with you now, I feel as if I am honoring the purpose that God placed before me on that day when He allowed me to return. I don't speak to impress, to create fear, or to arouse sensationalism. I speak because I know that there are people living today exactly as I lived, convinced that they have control over their own story without realizing that eternity is being written with every choice, even those that seem too insignificant to notice. When I awoke, carrying a spiritual memory that no human being could invent, I understood that God had not brought me back to silence, but to witness, because He knew that my voice would reach people who might never hear another warning. Since then, I've come to see life with a clarity that simultaneously frightens and liberates me. I've understood that evil almost never presents itself as something monstrous right from the start. It usually comes disguised as a quick fix, temporary relief, or a feeling of strength that deep down only masks wounds we never truly confront. I spent years believing I could balance my external choices with an inner self I insisted on not confronting. However, upon experiencing death and being exposed to the spiritual truth hidden behind every action, I realized that what we build in secret inevitably becomes what we will face in eternity. Death didn't greet me with darkness but with revelation, and this revelation didn't come to condemn, but to unveil what I refused to see while I still had time to change. From that moment on, I understood that no life built on destruction can stand before the eyes of God, because He sees deeply what we try to cover up with emotional justifications, weak arguments, or self-deception. Everything we offer to the world returns to us in ways we cannot control, and everything we do in the shadows transforms sooner or later into the spiritual harvest we will have to face. God is not moved by excuses, speeches, or empty promises. He knows the innermost being. He knows what we try to hide, and He even understands what we try to pretend we don't feel. And before Him, nothing can be disguised. Therefore, I offer this warning. No one escapes the spiritual consequences of their own choices. Sooner or later, we will all find ourselves facing the same gaze that struck me that day, and there will be no way to negotiate, back down, or pretend. There is a time for change, but time makes no deals with anyone. If you feel that something within you is being called, don't ignore it. God transforms what you cannot change on your own, but He expects you to take the first step. Before you leave, subscribe to the channel, because here you will find messages that can transform not only your path, but also your eternal destiny.